I'm asking again, what are you doing here?
Parked in a public lot. Is there a problem?
There have been complaints about suspicious vehicles.
About mine specifically?
I'm conducting an investigation.
That didn't answer the question.
Where do you work?
Why does that matter if you don't have a lawful basis to stop me?
What happens when a deputy tries to force control over someone who already knows he's crossing the line? This one started in a public parking lot, with a county deputy standing at the window of a black SUV, demanding identification from a black woman who was doing nothing illegal. She stayed in the driver's seat. He kept pressing. She kept asking the same thing back through the half-open window. What exactly was the legal reason for this stop? He didn't answer it straight. He couldn't. That's where the story really began. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you follow stories about police overreach, recordings, and people who know how to hold the line, hit like and subscribe. A lot of these situations only change once somebody refuses to be bullied. The woman in the SUV was Federal Judge Amara Vale. Deputy Nolan Rusk didn't know that yet. It was late afternoon in Belmere County, outside a professional plaza with a dental office, a tax firm, a physical therapy clinic, and a coffee shop on the corner. Normal place, open lot, cars coming and going, people still around, nothing locked down, nothing restricted. Judge Vale had parked there for a few minutes after leaving court because she had another event later and wanted time to review notes before heading across town. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't slumped over. She wasn't bothering anyone. She was sitting in her vehicle with a tablet in her lap. Rusk pulled into the lot, slowed near her SUV, then parked behind it at an angle. Not a full block in, but enough to make the point. He got out and went straight to her window. He asked what she was doing there. She told him she was parked in a public lot and asked if there was a problem. He said there had been reports of suspicious vehicles in the area. That was the first week move. Not a crime, not a traffic issue, not a complaint tied to her specifically, just suspicious vehicles. The kind of phrase officers use when they want room to improvise. Judge Vale didn't start explaining herself. She asked whether she was being detained. He ignored that and asked for identification. She asked again whether she was being detained. He said he was conducting an investigation. That answer did two things at once. It avoided the real issue, and it let him act like he had legal footing without actually naming any. She knew what he was doing. She'd seen this pattern before from the bench. Vague language first, pressure second, then escalation if the person didn't fold. She kept her hands visible and her voice level. No attitude, no panic. She asked what crime he suspected. He told her she was making a simple contact harder than it needed to be. That was another tell. He wasn't talking about law anymore. He was talking about compliance. He wanted the stop to work because she made it easy for him, not because he had a valid reason. She asked if she was free to leave. He still didn't answer clearly. He said he needed to confirm who she was. That made it worse. In his mind, her identity was becoming the reason for the stop. That's backward. He needed lawful grounds before forcing identification, not the other way around. A few people nearby had already started watching. Nothing dramatic. They just noticed the deputy's tone. One employee walking out of the tax office slowed down near the sidewalk. A delivery driver loading boxes into a van kept looking over. A man near the coffee shop entrance stopped and stayed put. Rusk asked where she worked. That question said more than he probably realized. He wasn't asking about a specific offense. He was trying to figure out whether she belonged there. Same thing with a different costume on it. Judge Vale didn't play along. She told him again he needed to state a legal basis for detaining her. He asked where she was headed next. Same problem. No legal basis. Just fishing. She repeated that being seated in a legally parked car in a public lot was not a crime. He stepped back from the window and called in her plate. That was him looking for something to save the stop. Maybe expired registration. Maybe a warrant. Maybe anything that could give him a better reason after the fact. Officers do that when they start with instinct and hope the computer helps them later. Nothing helpful came back right away. At that point, a careful officer backs out. He didn't. He changed the reason. Now he mentioned trespass complaints in the plaza. That didn't hold either. The lot was open. Businesses were still operating. No owner was present. No one had approached her. No one had asked her to leave. She pointed that out immediately. Then he switched again. He said he was checking on her welfare. That one didn't fit his own behavior. Welfare checks don't usually open with a demand for ID and a confrontational tone. They definitely don't come after a trespass theory fails. By then, one of the people watching had his phone out and was recording. Rusk saw it. His shoulders tightened. He looked around once, then went back to the window. Some officers get more careful when they know they're being recorded. Others get more stubborn because now they feel exposed. He went with stubborn. He told Judge Vale to step out of the vehicle. She asked on what legal basis. He called it a lawful order. She asked if she was being detained. He finally said yes. That mattered. Up to that point, he had stayed slippery. Now he was committing himself. If this got reviewed later, he couldn't hide behind casual contact anymore. He had just made it a detention. She asked what specific facts supported it. He gave her a pile of weak answers. Suspicious vehicle. Refusal to identify. Complaints in the area. None of that cleaned it up. It just showed he was stacking excuses because the first one never held. She stayed seated, still calm, still focused. She didn't start arguing in circles. She kept bringing him back to the same issue. What lawful reason did he actually have? He didn't like that. A lot of officers are comfortable when they control the pace. Question, answer, command, movement. She broke that rhythm. Every time he tried to push past the legal gap, she brought him back to it. Then he made the next move people always make when they feel their authority slipping. He called for backup. That changed the temperature right away. Another unit meant this was no longer one deputy making a bad stop. It was about to become a scene. More uniforms, more pressure, more chances for somebody to turn a weak detention into a bigger mess just because they didn't want to admit the first move was bad. Judge Amara Vale was still sitting in her vehicle, calm, not rambling, not helping him build a case against her, just holding the line and making him say out loud what he clearly did not have. Deputy Nolan Rusk still had no idea who she was, and the backup unit was already pulling into the lot. The second patrol unit rolled into the lot before Nolan Rusk had figured out how to fix the stop he had already messed up. Deputy Marisol Quaid stepped out and read the scene fast. Black SUV in a marked space. Driver still inside. Rusk tight at the window. Already too invested. One man on a phone recording. Two more people watching from the walkway. That was enough. Good officers can usually tell when a routine contact has gone sideways before anyone finishes explaining it. Rusk tried to frame it for her right away. He said he was working a suspicious vehicle call. He said the driver had refused to identify herself. He said he had detained her because she was being uncooperative. That version sounded clean for about 3 seconds. Then Quaid moved closer and got the other side. The woman inside the SUV, still calm, still seated, laid it out in a way that immediately exposed the gap. She had been parked legally in a public lot. Rusk had approached and demanded identification. He had not named a specific offense. When she asked whether she was being detained, he danced around it. When she asked for legal grounds, he switched explanations instead of giving one. That matters a lot. People who are bluffing usually ramble. People who know exactly what's happening keep it simple. Quaid turned back to Rusk and pressed him for the actual basis, not the attitude, not the frustration, the reason. That's where he started slipping. The original call, as he described it, was vague. No clear suspect description, no plate tied to a crime, no business owner waving deputies over, no report that this specific SUV had done anything illegal. He had seen a vehicle, made assumptions, and walked up expecting compliance to do the rest of the work for him. When that didn't happen, he had started stacking labels on top of the stop. Suspicious vehicle, possible trespass, welfare check, refusal to identify, officer safety. Same encounter, different wrapping every 30 seconds. Quaid saw it. So did the people recording. The woman in the SUV kept bringing him back to the same point. She wanted one thing from him, a lawful reason. That was it. He kept trying to move the encounter forward without ever locking that down. That works with people who get nervous and start over-explaining themselves. It doesn't work with someone who knows the order matters. Grounds first. Commands second. Rusk was irritated now. Not because she was hard to understand, because she was impossible to push. Big difference. He tried another route. He started talking about the area, the businesses, the complaints they'd had, the need to check people out when something looked off. That kind of language sounds harmless until you listen closely. He still wasn't tying her to an actual act. He was talking about presence, about fit, about whether she seemed like she belonged in that lot. That's when he said too much. He made it clear, in front of Quaid and in front of the civilians recording, that part of his concern was whether she even had a reason to be there. That line changed the whole stop. It stripped the badge language off it. This was not about a crime. It was about him seeing a black woman in a place he had decided required explanation. The woman didn't get emotional. She did something better. She slowed him down and pinned the statement where everyone could hear it. She made him confront what he had just implied. He tried to back off, said she was twisting things. She wasn't. He had walked himself right into the center of the problem. Quaid didn't jump in to rescue him either. That's another thing worth noticing. Backup officers often have a choice in moments like this. They can help bury a bad stop, or they can stop it from getting worse. Quaid chose the second path. She pushed him on the basics. His plate check had not given him anything useful. The SUV was properly registered. No warrant issue. No active bulletin tying that vehicle to a criminal investigation. No owner complaint. No trespass warning. Nothing solid. He had started with a hunch and then tried to build legal authority around it after the fact. That's not policing, that's fishing. Rusk still didn't let go. He ordered the driver out of the vehicle again. This time he tried to hide behind tone and volume. He acted like saying it with more force would make it more lawful. The woman stayed where she was and asked him once again what offense supported the detention. He still couldn't answer cleanly. He reached for obstruction for a moment, then drifted away from it, touched trespass again, then lost it. Mentioned officer safety even though nothing about her conduct supported that. Hands visible. No movement toward the console. No reaching, no threat, no effort to leave. No reason for the performance he was putting on. Then the stop hit the point he should have feared from the beginning. The woman identified herself as Judge Amara Vale of the United States District Court. That landed hard. Not because her title changed the law. It didn't. She had already been right before he knew her name. What changed was the level of damage. The stop had just moved from a bad roadside decision to an event that would almost certainly be reviewed by people who understood exactly how thin his conduct was. Quaid's posture changed right away. She understood the exposure. So did the people with phones up. Rusk did too, although he tried not to show it. He asked for identification again, but he sounded different now. Less command, more retreat. Judge Vale did not let him rewrite the scene. She made it clear the issue was not who she was. The issue was what he had already done. He had detained first, searched for reasons later, and changed those reasons in front of witnesses when each one failed. That was the cleanest summary of the whole mess. Quaid looked at him like she already knew where this was headed. Internal review. Body camera pull. Dispatch audio. Maybe media if any of those recordings got posted. He knew it too. He had just hoped he could muscle the stop into something cleaner before anyone really looked at it. Too late now. He backed off. No apology, no honest explanation. Just a stiff, late statement that she was free to go. Classic move. End the detention and pray the rest dies quietly. Judge Vale didn't leave immediately. Smart. She stayed long enough to lock in the next layer. Names, badge numbers, confirmation that both body cameras had been running. The incident reference. The dispatch call tied to the so-called suspicious vehicle report. She wasn't posturing. She was preserving the record before the story could be cleaned up on paper. Quaid gave her information without a fight. Rusk did the same, but slower. He was already realizing the real problem wasn't that he had stopped the wrong woman. It was that he had treated her the way he probably treated plenty of people who never had the standing, the knowledge, or the leverage to push back this hard. Then Judge Amara Vale drove out of the lot. Rusk stayed there with Quaid and the witnesses, and the phone still pointed his way. And for the first time since he walked up to that SUV, he had no control over what happened next. Judge Amara Vale did not waste time once she left that parking lot. She handled it the way people do when they know the difference between outrage and evidence. First, she wrote down the timeline while it was still fresh. Then she secured what mattered: the deputies' names, the unit numbers, the incident reference, the location, the time, and the names of the civilians who had recorded parts of the stop. By that night, she also had court security aware of the encounter and a formal preservation request moving toward the sheriff's office. That was the first hit. The second came from the phones in the lot. One of the witnesses uploaded a short clip that evening. Not the full encounter, just enough to show the shape of it. A deputy pressing a black woman for ID in a public lot. Her staying calm. Him stumbling when asked for an actual legal basis. Then, the moment the title came out. Federal judge. That clip moved fast because people understood it immediately. Not because she was powerful. Because if an officer felt comfortable doing that to a federal judge in public, then regular people already knew what the rest of that story meant. By the next morning, Belmere County Sheriff's Office had a problem on its hands. At first, they tried the usual soft language. Statement under review, full facts being gathered, commitment to professionalism, that kind of thing, safe words, delay words. Nobody serious was impressed. Too many people had already seen enough. More important, the office knew body camera from 2 deputies existed, dispatch audio existed, and the stop report was going to be checked against all of it. That's where bad stops really collapse. Not on the pavement. On playback. Rusk's report didn't help him. He tried to tighten the story. He made the contact sound cleaner than it was. He leaned on suspicious circumstances, investigative detention, officer safety concerns. But once the footage was pulled, the problem was obvious. The reasons kept changing. The facts never got stronger. He had started with a vague claim, then kept reaching for something firmer as the encounter went on. Internal Affairs opened the review within 48 hours. That part matters too. Departments drag their feet when they think a complaint can be buried. They move faster when they know somebody with standing is going to keep pulling. Judge Vale did exactly that. She did not rant in public. She did not go on television right away. She worked the process and made sure every piece of the process had to move. Quaid got interviewed early. Her statement mattered because she had arrived after the stop began. That made her useful. She was not tied to the original decision. She confirmed what the footage already showed. By the time she got there, Rusk still had no clear, stable basis for detention. He was trying to hold authority together with volume and repetition. Dispatch records made it worse for him. The original call did not describe Judge Vale's SUV as tied to any known offense. No trespass complaint had been made by any business in the plaza. No request for removal had come from a property manager. No active alert matched her vehicle. He had built the stop out of suspicion first and facts second. Then more people started talking. That is always the danger for departments after one of these incidents. Once a name gets loose, other encounters start surfacing. A local defense lawyer said Rusk had a pattern of pushing weak detentions and then leaning on attitude-based justifications. 2 residents filed old complaint numbers with reporters. Neither case had gone anywhere. One involved a stop outside a fitness center. Another involved a man questioned while waiting for his daughter near a tutoring office. Same county, same basic smell to it. Now, the sheriff's office had a single bad stop turning into a pattern question. That's when command staff stopped treating it like a public relations issue and started treating it like exposure. The sheriff met with county council. County council met with risk management. Risk management did the math every office does in private. Video, witnesses, weak legal basis. Public official involved. Clear profiling language caught during the stop. That mix gets expensive fast. Rusk was pulled off patrol before the first week ended. Officially, it was administrative leave pending investigation. In plain language, the office no longer trusted him in public, with a camera pointed at him. Judge Vale did not ask for special treatment. She pushed something more dangerous than that. She pushed consistency. If the stop was unlawful when it happened to her, then the standards for discipline and policy review should reflect every other person it could happen to. That made her harder to dismiss. She wasn't asking the system to protect a judge. She was forcing it to answer for what it tolerated when the person stopped had no title at all. By the second week, the county had outside counsel involved, and the sheriff's office had ordered a policy review on consensual encounters, parking lot detentions, and identification demands absent clear legal cause. That review exposed another ugly truth. Deputies had broad discretion on paper and weak supervision in practice. Training covered the basics, but street culture filled in the gaps, and street culture often teaches the wrong lesson. Push first, explain later. Treat refusal as threat. Treat questions as resistance. That mindset had been living in the office long before Judge Vale parked in that lot. Rusk's interview with investigators went badly. He could not keep the story steady. The same problem from the parking lot followed him into the review room. He kept shifting emphasis. First, it was suspicious vehicle complaints, then officer safety, then non-compliance, then concern about trespass. Every version ran into the same wall. None of it explained why he escalated before he had a real basis. The witness video got released in longer form after that. Then part of the body camera did too. That ended any hope of quiet cleanup. People watched him press and circle and improvise. They watched Judge Vale stay measured. They watched the moment where his concern about who belonged there came through. That line did major damage because it was simple and familiar. A lot of viewers had heard some version of it before. Maybe not in those exact words. Same meaning. The discipline came down before the month was over. Rusk was terminated, not reassigned, not quietly moved. Fired. The findings named unlawful detention, improper escalation, failure to articulate reasonable suspicion, and conduct inconsistent with departmental policy and constitutional standards. The county also referred the case for decertification review, which meant his badge problem was no longer limited to Belmere County. The sheriff's office announced mandatory retraining for patrol deputies. New rules followed. Supervisors had to review more field detention reports. Deputies had to document the factual basis for ID demands with more specificity. Parking lot contacts without clear criminal nexus got extra scrutiny. That didn't fix everything. No serious person would claim that. But it did something real. It made lazy pretext harder to hide. Judge Vale reached a civil settlement with the county months later. The number stayed confidential, but the non-financial terms did not. Policy changes, training revisions, weaker retention requirements, better supervisory review. The county wanted the case closed. She wanted the structure changed enough that the next person would have a stronger record when an officer tried the same game. That is the part people miss when they tell stories like this too simply. This was never just about one deputy learning the hard way, that the woman in the SUV was a federal judge. It was about a deputy making a stop he thought he could control because he thought the person in front of him would fold. He guessed wrong. Then the record caught up with him. And that's the lesson. A lot of abuse of authority survives on habit, on speed, on confusion, on the belief that most people won't know where the line is, and even if they do, they won't be able to prove when it got crossed. This time, the person in that seat knew the law, knew the process, and knew that calm is often more dangerous to bad policing than anger ever will be. What would you have done in that parking lot? Have you ever seen an officer push a stop past the point where the law clearly ran out? Put your thoughts in the comments. Share the story with somebody who thinks these encounters are always just misunderstandings. And subscribe if you want more stories about power, pressure, and the moment somebody refuses to hand over rights just because a badge expects it.
Put your hands on the truck.
Okay. I just want to know what this stop is for.
You don't run this stop.
I do. I'm not trying to run anything. I pulled over. I gave you my license. I'm cooperating.
Then stop talking and do what I said.
I'm just trying to understand what this is about.
I told you to stop talking.
Hey, easy, man. Easy. I'm not fighting.
What happens when a Texas officer turns a basic traffic stop into a power contest in front of someone who understands exactly how fast bad policing becomes civil liability? On a dark stretch of frontage road outside Houston, one patrol officer kept escalating when he should have slowed down. He kept pushing when the driver stayed calm. He kept making it personal. What he didn't realize in that moment was that the dash cam, the body cam, and the roadside witnesses were all locking him into a version of events he would never be able to talk his way out of later. Before we get into it, tell me where you're watching from, and if you follow stories about police overreach, bad stops, and real accountability, hit like and subscribe. This one matters because the fallout didn't stop at the roadside. The driver was not a criminal. He was not drunk. He was not armed in any illegal way. He was not running. He was not threatening anybody. His name in the story was Darren Pike, 36 years old, a regional logistics supervisor based outside Houston, married, 2 kids, clean record, the kind of man who kept his registration current, his insurance current, and his voice under control even when other people lost theirs. That part matters. Because later, the officer tried to write the scene like Darren had forced everything that happened next. The footage said otherwise. The officer was Travis Harlan, a county patrol deputy with a reputation for getting heated fast. Not the loud clown type. Worse. The kind who acted like every small question from a citizen was a challenge to his authority. Guys like that are dangerous because they don't think they're losing control. They think control means making everybody else feel it. That night started ordinary. Darren had left a late supplier meeting and was driving home in his gray pickup a little after 9 p.m. Traffic was light. Storefronts were half lit. He was moving through one of those commercial strips where speed limits change fast and patrol cars sit waiting for easy stops. Harlan pulled out behind him after Darren came off the feeder road. The official reason for the stop would change later. That's always a bad sign. First, it was speed. Then it was a lane issue. Later, it turned into officer safety language. Same pattern every time somebody's trying to fix a weak stop after the fact. Darren saw the lights, signaled, and pulled into a gas station lot with bright overhead lighting. Smart move. Cameras, witnesses, space. He turned the truck off, rolled the window down, and put both hands where they could be seen. Nothing dramatic. Just a man trying to get through a stop and go home. Harlan walked up already tense. Not alert. Tense. Big difference. He asked for license and insurance. Darren told him he'd reached slowly and did exactly that. Harlan took the documents, looked them over, then asked where Darren was coming from. Darren answered. Then Harlan asked where he was headed. Darren answered that, too. Then came the first shift. Harlan asked why Darren had taken so long to pull over. That wasn't true. The dashcam timestamp later showed Darren signaled quickly and stopped in a well-lit public lot within seconds. Darren explained that he wanted a safe place with lighting. Reasonable answer, smart answer. Harlan didn't take it that way. He took it as Darren explaining himself too well. Again, guys like this don't hear calm as calm. They hear calm as resistance. So he pressed harder. He asked whether Darren had anything in the vehicle he needed to know about. Darren said no contraband, no illegal weapons, no reason for concern. Harlan then asked him to step out. Now, Darren knew something a lot of people don't. An officer can order you out during a lawful traffic stop. Arguing about that on the roadside usually goes nowhere good. So he complied. Slow, visible hands, no attitude. That should have been the end of the tension curve. Instead, it became the start of the real problem. Once Darren was out of the truck, Harlan changed his whole posture. He got closer. He started stacking commands. Hands here, face this way. Don't move. Answer the question directly. That tactic is old. Flood somebody with instructions, then act like confusion is defiance. Darren kept trying to stay ahead of it. He said he was complying. He said he didn't want any trouble. He asked what the stop was actually for. That question landed badly, not because it was aggressive. The audio later made that clear. Darren's tone stayed level. No yelling, no cursing, no threats. But Harlan reacted like the question itself crossed a line. That was the moment the stop stopped being about traffic and started being about ego. Harlan told Darren to place his hands on the truck. Darren did. Harlan started a pat-down, harder than it needed to be. Darren turned his head slightly and asked what justified a search. Harlan snapped back that he was in charge and Darren needed to stop talking. That line mattered later because it told the whole story in one shot. Not safety, not investigation, not procedure, control. By then, another unit was coming in. Deputy Maya Lott pulled into the lot as backup. Her arrival should have cooled things down. Sometimes a second officer resets the scene. Sometimes it makes the first officer act even bigger, because now he has an audience. That's what happened here. Harlan started narrating Darren as non-compliant before the facts supported it. He told Maya that Darren was being argumentative. He said Darren was acting suspicious. He said he wasn't following instructions cleanly. The problem was the cameras were still rolling, and Darren had done almost nothing except ask what was happening and keep telling the officer he was cooperating. Darren said again that he was not resisting and asked whether he was being detained or arrested. Harlan didn't answer straight. Another bad sign. Clean stops usually come with clean answers. Then came the move that changed the whole case. Harlan grabbed Darren's arm, tried to force it higher behind his back, and shoved him toward the side of the truck. Fast, unnecessary, pure escalation. Darren instinctively stiffened and said he wasn't resisting. Maya stepped closer but didn't interrupt. Harlan took that moment of body tension and treated it like a threat. That's how bad reports get built in real time. Officer creates pressure, civilian reacts to pressure. Officer calls the reaction aggression. Within seconds, Darren was slammed against the truck and being cuffed. Not after a chase, not after a swing, not after a weapon. After a question. After compliance. After one officer decided he wasn't going to be questioned in public. And the worst part? Harlan still hadn't clearly stated a reason that matched the force he was using. The dash cam kept recording. The body cam kept recording. People at the gas station had started looking over. One man near the ice freezer had his phone out. Another woman standing by pump 6 turned to watch the whole thing. The scene had gone from ordinary stop to public problem. Darren was breathing hard now, trying to keep his voice steady while cuffed against his own truck. Harlan kept talking over him, kept saying, "Stop resisting," kept saying it louder than the facts supported. That phrase shows up a lot when officers know the video is going to matter. And now the case had its first clear fracture. Because once an officer starts performing for the report instead of handling the scene, he's not policing anymore. He's protecting himself. That was where the stop crossed the line. Officer Travis Harlan had already put Darren Pike in cuffs. That should have forced the stop into a clear legal lane. Either there was a real basis for detention, or there wasn't. He still didn't give one. Darren was bent over the side of his truck, wrists pinned too high. He kept saying he was cooperating. He kept asking what he was being detained for. Harlan kept calling him resistant without answering the question. That mattered because the cameras locked the order in place. Darren had complied first. Harlan escalated first. Then Harlan started naming excuses. Deputy Maya Lott had arrived by then. Harlan gave her a fast version of the scene and described Darren as argumentative and suspicious. He made it sound like he had dealt with a dangerous driver. The body cam did not back that up. Darren had asked questions, that was it. Harlan searched Darren's pockets and pulled out his wallet, keys, and phone. Darren said he did not consent to any search. Harlan ignored him. Then Harlan added a new reason for the stop. He said he smelled marijuana coming from the truck. That claim showed up late. Too late. He had not mentioned it at the window. He had not mentioned it when he ordered Darren out. He had not mentioned it during the pat-down. It appeared only after Darren was cuffed and after the stop had already turned ugly. That kind of change destroys officers in court. Harlan then opened the truck and searched the cab. Center console, glove box, work bag, papers, charging cables, receipts, nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, nothing that justified the force he had already used. Darren kept asking for a supervisor, calmly, more than once. Harlan told him to stop talking. That line hurt him later, too. Darren was not yelling. He was not threatening anybody. He was asking for process. Harlan treated even that like defiance. The search kept going. Harlan found a legal pad with work notes and route times from Darren's meeting schedule. He started treating it like suspicious evidence. He hinted that Darren might have been checking locations. That was weak and everybody there could see it. He was no longer investigating a stop. He was trying to rescue one. People at the gas station had noticed by then. A clerk stood near the entrance with a phone up. Another customer stayed by the pumps and recorded from farther back. Darren was cuffed beside his own truck, while Harlan kept talking bigger than the facts supported. Then Sergeant Eli Mercer arrived. This was the first real chance to stop the damage. Mercer asked Harlan for the reason for the stop. Harlan gave him a polished version. He said Darren delayed pulling over, acted suspicious, resisted commands, and showed signs that justified detention and search. Then Mercer asked Darren what happened. Darren gave a short answer. He said he pulled over in a lit public place, handed over his documents, stepped out when ordered, asked why he was being searched, and got slammed into the truck. No speech, no performance, just the order of events. Mercer then asked Harlan what the original violation was. That was where the stop broke open. Harlan first said speeding, then he said lane movement. Then he shifted toward officer safety and possible narcotics indicators. 3 different lanes. Same stop, same few minutes. That looked bad immediately. Mercer asked if dispatch had returned anything. No warrants, no alerts, no violent history, nothing. He asked whether any contraband had been found. Nothing. He asked whether Darren had threatened anyone. No. He asked whether Darren had attempted to flee. No. Now the problem was obvious. Darren was cuffed, searched, and shoved around, but the facts under the stop kept shrinking instead of getting stronger. Mercer looked at Darren's wrists. Red marks. He looked at Darren's shoulder position, tight and stiff. He looked at the truck, half searched and empty. Then he looked at the people recording. At that point, Harlan should have backed off. He still didn't. He repeated that Darren had tensed up and would not follow commands cleanly. That was the phrase he leaned on. Tensed up. Officers use that a lot when force came first, and they need reaction to sound like threat. The problem for him was simple. When an officer jerks a cuffed man's arm high behind his back, the body reacts. That is not assault. That is physics. Mercer asked Darren one more direct question. He asked whether Darren had struck, pulled away, or made any threat at all. Darren said no. The videos agreed with Darren. That was the moment the stop changed from roadside misconduct to legal exposure. Harlan had no clean reason for the stop, no solid basis for the search, no contraband, no threat, and no witness video that helped him. He had force on camera and shifting explanations on audio. Mercer finally ordered the cuffs removed. No apology, just a release. Darren straightened up slowly and rolled his shoulder. He asked for badge numbers. He asked whether the stop was being documented as use of force. He asked for the supervisor's name. He was already thinking ahead, and that was smart. Once a stop goes this wrong, memory becomes a weapon. Video's the only thing that cuts through it. Harlan stood there angry, embarrassed, and still trying to look in control. But that part was over. The real damage was just starting, because Darren went home with wrist marks, shoulder pain, and the names of everyone on scene. Harlan drove away thinking he could still write the report his way. He was wrong. The dash cam was about to turn this stop into a lawsuit the county could not laugh off. Darren Pike did not let the stop turn into a matter of memory. As soon as he got home, he photographed the marks on his wrists and the swelling in his shoulder. His wife, Nia Pike, pushed him to get checked that same night. And that turned out to be important, because the medical record fixed the injury in time before anyone inside the department could minimize what happened. The next day, Darren filed a complaint, requested the dash cam and body cam footage, and hired a civil rights attorney named Camille Mercer. From that point on, the stop stopped being just an ugly roadside encounter and became a legal problem for the county. At first, the sheriff's office handled it the way departments usually do. They said the incident was under review. They said they took the matter seriously, and they used careful language and gave themselves room. That might have worked if the case had stayed inside their own walls. It didn't. Witness videos from the gas station were posted online within 2 days. One showed Darren already pinned against the truck, while Officer Travis Harlan kept saying he was resisting. Another showed the search of the vehicle after Darren had already been cuffed. Once those clips started spreading, the case moved beyond the department's control. Reporters started asking direct questions, and the department did not have good answers. The stop reason was unclear. The search produced nothing, and the force looked worse every time people watched it. When Camille Mercer got the official footage, the problem for the county became much more serious. The dash cam showed Darren pulling over quickly into a lit public place. That undercut the idea that he had delayed or acted evasively. The body cam showed him handing over his documents, stepping out when ordered, and keeping his tone controlled even while Harlan became more aggressive. It also showed the officer changing his explanation as the stop unfolded. That mattered because lawsuits like this are not built only on force. They are built on the full sequence, and the sequence did not help the deputy at any point. Camille filed suit in federal court. She went after the stop, the search, the force, and the county's supervision of Harlan. She argued that Darren had been detained without a solid legal basis, searched without valid justification, and handled with force that did not match the facts on scene. She also argued that the department had failed to act on warning signs long before Darren ever crossed paths with that patrol unit. That part became stronger when more information came out. Harlan had prior complaints in his file. He had been accused before of escalating routine stops and turning basic questions into confrontations. Those earlier complaints had not ended his career, and that became a problem for the county once Camille showed a pattern instead of a one-time mistake. It is always harder for a department to defend an officer when the public can see the behavior was not new. The case kept growing. Local media picked it up first. Then regional outlets did. Darren was no longer just a man from a bad stop outside Houston. He became part of a larger conversation about officers who turn routine enforcement into personal battles. The footage made that point more effectively than any press conference could. Darren had not been reckless. He had not created the danger. He had asked questions and tried to stay calm. Harlan had turned that into a reason to dominate the scene. The department placed Harlan on administrative leave, but that did little to calm public reaction. Camille Mercer then held a short press conference outside the courthouse with Darren and Nia beside her. She kept the message simple. She said this was what happened when an officer treated a citizen's calm questions as disrespect and used force to settle that feeling. Darren spoke briefly after her. He said he had not been trying to challenge anyone. He had been trying to get home. That was the line people remembered because it matched what the footage showed. The county tried to settle the matter quietly through early talks, but Camille did not let it go cheap. She had the video, the medical record, the witness accounts, and the contradictions in Harlan's own account. Once discovery started, the county's position got weaker. Harlan's training records showed he had completed the standard instruction on use of force, search limits, and de-escalation. That closed off one possible excuse. The problem was not lack of training. The problem was that he had either ignored it or thought he could get away with ignoring it. His written report made things even worse. In it, he claimed Darren had been aggressive, slow to comply, and physically resistant during a lawful detention. Camille compared that report to the timestamps and audio from the footage, and the differences were too obvious to explain away. The more closely the case was examined, the harder it became for the county to argue that this was just a messy stop handled under pressure. The case did not make it to a jury verdict. The county settled. The settlement was $6.4 million. That number was large enough to make national headlines, and it reflected more than the physical injury. It reflected the stop, the force, the search, the bad report, and the county's exposure after keeping an officer on the road despite earlier complaints. By the time the settlement was announced, the county knew it was not defending a split-second mistake. It was defending a pattern caught clearly on camera. Harlan resigned before the internal disciplinary process fully finished, but that did not protect him. The state licensing board opened decertification proceedings, and a separate review looked at whether parts of his reporting crossed legal lines. Even without a criminal conviction, his career in law enforcement was effectively over. No department looking at that footage and that lawsuit would want the risk. The fallout did not stop with him. Deputy Maya Lott was formally reprimanded for failing to intervene earlier, and the county had to explain why meaningful supervision only arrived after the damage was already done. That part mattered too, because public trust does not collapse only because one officer goes too far. It collapses when everyone around him lets him keep going. After the settlement, the county changed several policies. Supervisors were required to respond more quickly to force during low-level traffic stops. Search documentation rules were tightened. Officers were required to state stop reasons more clearly on camera, and backup officers got stronger intervention training. Those changes came late, but they came because the county had finally paid enough money to take the problem seriously. Darren did not come out of it celebrating. He came out of it with proof that what happened to him was wrong and could not be buried under paperwork. He got treatment for his shoulder. He got accountability in the one language the county could not ignore. He also heard from a lot of other people after the case became public. Some sent messages. Some shared their own stories. Some said they never filed complaints before because they assumed nothing would happen. That is what cases like this do when they break open. They show people that the official report is not always the real story, and that video can force a system to face what it would rather smooth over. In the end, Darren Pike did not beat Officer Travis Harlan by out-shouting him or by trying to win an argument on the roadside. He beat him by staying controlled, documenting the aftermath, and refusing to let the deputy's version become the final version. Harlan turned a routine stop into a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because he could not handle a calm driver asking basic questions. That was the real cause of the damage, and the county ended up paying for it.
Hands where I can see them, right now.
Listen to me, I'm federal. I have credentials.
Don't reach for anything.
I'm not reaching.
Turn around.
You need to slow this down and verify.
Turn around now.
What's the legal basis?
Suspicious behavior. Possible weapon.
Possible is not enough to do
Hands
this.
behind.
What happens when a deputy in a crowded shopping mall decides his badge gives him room to skip the rules, and the man he picks to dominate already knows exactly where that authority stops? That was the real story inside Westgate Center that Saturday afternoon. Deputy Ryan Keller had Daniel Cortez at gunpoint near the entrance to a department store, and he was treating a calm, plainly dressed man like an armed suspect in front of families, teenagers, store employees, and half a dozen raised phones. Daniel kept telling him the same thing. He said he was federal law enforcement. He said he had identification. He said Keller was making this worse by shouting over him instead of verifying anything. Keller didn't slow down. He doubled down. If you watch stories about police overreach, say where you're watching from. And if you follow this channel for real cases about authority, accountability, and people who know their rights, hit like and subscribe. This one got ugly fast, and the worst part is how avoidable it was. Daniel Cortez was 39 years old and worked as an ICE agent assigned to a regional task force. Off duty, he didn't look like some movie version of federal law enforcement. He looked like a man who had stopped at a mall on a weekend to pick up a birthday gift and get out in under 20 minutes. Dark jeans, plain polo, ball cap, no agency jacket, no attitude. He had his credentials, his wallet, and his off-duty weapon carried lawfully under federal policy. He also had experience, a lot of it. He knew what a normal police contact looked like. He knew how trained officers handled uncertain situations. Secure the scene, assess behavior, issue clear commands, verify identity. Don't turn a public space into a panic zone because your ego got there first. Keller didn't do any of that. The whole thing started near a jewelry store on the lower level. Mall security had gotten a call from a kiosk employee who reported seeing a man adjust something near his waistband while moving quickly through a crowded corridor. That was thin already. In a busy mall, people adjusted clothing, checked phones, moved bags, shifted holsters, fixed belts. Good officers knew the difference between a vague concern and a crime. Keller was working extra duty mall detail that day, and he treated that call like he'd just been handed a major takedown. By the time he spotted Daniel near the store entrance, Keller had already built a story in his own head. Suspicious male, possible weapon, public danger. That kind of self-written script is where these encounters go bad, because after that, every normal move starts looking like proof. Daniel noticed Keller approaching before Keller said a word. He saw the speed, the hand placement, the locked-in stare. He knew immediately this wasn't going to begin with a calm question. Keller closed distance too fast and started issuing commands. Daniel stopped moving. Good decision. He kept his hands visible. Better decision. He told Keller he was law enforcement and started explaining that he had identification. That should have changed the pace of the encounter right there. Not ended it. Changed it. A competent deputy would have contained the scene, kept distance, ordered slow movements, requested the credentials, and called dispatch to verify. Keller went the other way. He drew his weapon. That changed everything in the mall. Shoppers froze. A woman pulling two children toward the food court turned around and rushed the other direction. A store employee backed into the doorway and pulled out a phone. Another shopper started recording from behind a column. Within seconds, this stopped being a police contact and became a public spectacle. Daniel didn't match Keller's energy. That mattered. He didn't argue for the crowd. He didn't posture. He didn't try to win the moment. He stayed measured and kept repeating the same core facts. He said he was a federal agent. He said he was off duty. He said he had credentials and lawful carry authorization. He said Keller needed to stop escalate and verify. Keller kept barking commands over him. He wanted total compliance before facts. That's the kind of move that sounds strong to an officer who's lost control internally. In reality, it usually means the officer knows the ground under the stop is weak and is trying to fix it with force. Daniel tried to tell him where the credentials were. Keller wouldn't let him reach. Then Keller started giving the kind of contradictory orders that show a scene is slipping. Keep hands up. Don't move. Identify yourself. Don't reach. Produce ID. Don't touch anything. It was messy, and everyone around them could see it. A second deputy, Mason Pike, arrived about a minute later. Pike came in with less swagger and more uncertainty. He looked at Daniel, looked at Keller, and looked at the crowd. Then he heard Daniel again identify himself as federal law enforcement. Pike should have been the reset point. He should have slowed Keller down, asked what exactly they had, asked whether the man had threatened anyone, asked whether any complainant described criminal conduct, asked whether anyone had even seen a weapon or just a hand near a waistband. He didn't. Not yet. That hesitation was part of the problem. A bad stop often survives because the second officer doesn't want to challenge the first one in public. Keller moved in and forced Daniel to the ground-facing wall beside a closed storefront. He holstered his weapon only after Pike got close enough to help control the scene. Then, they handcuffed Daniel in full view of a crowd that was getting bigger by the second. Daniel told them the cuffs were unnecessary and the detention was unlawful. He kept talking in short, controlled statements. He gave them his name. He gave them his agency. He told them exactly how to verify him. Keller still acted like he was dealing with a liar buying time. That was the moment this stopped looking like caution and started looking like pride. Daniel had not run. He had not threatened anyone. He had not refused to identify himself. He had not made a furtive move after contact. The only thing he had done was refuse to act scared enough to satisfy Keller. Mall security supervisor Elena Ruiz arrived from the concourse within another minute. She came in with the one thing Keller clearly didn't want in that moment: a neutral institutional witness. Elena had already been alerted that multiple interior cameras covered the corridor, the storefront entrance, and the angle where first contact happened. She told the deputies the mall had everything on video. She also told them the original call did not report a crime in progress, just a concern about a man who appeared armed. That should have narrowed the situation. It should have pushed Keller toward verification. Instead, he tried to keep control of the narrative by calling Daniel uncooperative. That line didn't play well. Too many people had seen too much by then. Several shoppers were recording from different angles. One of them caught Daniel calmly telling Keller that his credentials were in his pocket wallet holder and that he would comply with any safe instruction to retrieve them. Another angle caught Pike looking directly at Keller after hearing that, like even he knew the scene had gone too far. Elena Ruiz said the mall could clear space and assist with identification away from the crowd. Keller refused. He wanted the scene to stay on his terms. A big mistake. Because once a public detention turns into a control performance, every extra second becomes evidence. Daniel stood there cuffed in the middle of a shopping mall, surrounded by phones, watched by strangers, detained by a deputy who had ignored the most basic step in a lawful armed encounter. Verify before you dramatize. And Keller still hadn't figured out who he had in handcuffs. That part came next, and it made everything worse. Keller had Daniel Cortez in cuffs, in the middle of a mall, and he still hadn't done the one thing that mattered: verify who he had stopped. Daniel kept it simple. He gave his full name again, said he was an off-duty federal agent, told them where his credentials were, told them he was legally armed. No attitude, no stalling, just facts. That should have ended the guessing. Instead, Keller kept pushing. He told Mason Pike to disarm Daniel first. Pike recovered the firearm without any problem. Daniel had already told them where it was. That should have been another signal that he had been truthful from the start. Then Pike found the badge wallet. He handed it to Keller. Keller opened it and paused. That was the first real crack in the whole scene. For the first time, he had something in his hand that backed up everything Daniel had been saying. He still didn't uncuff him. He started asking extra questions instead. Office location, assignment, why he was carrying off duty. None of that changed the main issue. Daniel had identified himself. Keller had ignored it. That's what made the stop bad. Not just the mistake. The refusal to stop once the mistake was obvious. Pike called dispatch to verify Daniel's credentials. That should have happened at the start. Instead, it happened after the gun was drawn, after the cuffs, after a public scene had already formed. By then, people were filming from every angle. One shopper had the first commands on video. Another had Daniel telling Keller he was federal law enforcement before the cuffs went on. A store employee had filmed the side angle. Mall security had the hallway cameras too. The whole thing was getting boxed in by evidence. Elena Ruiz, the mall security supervisor, tried again to move the detention out of the main corridor. She told them the cameras covered first contact and mall management would preserve the footage. She also made clear the original call had not described a threat or a crime in progress, just a concern about a man who might be armed. That mattered, because Keller was still treating this like he had interrupted a violent suspect. He hadn't. He had rushed a man who had done nothing illegal, then kept escalating after clear identification. Dispatch came back and confirmed Daniel's identity. That should have been the end. Keller still dragged it out. He kept Daniel in cuffs a little longer and asked more questions that sounded less like police work and more like cover. Why hadn't Daniel said it sooner? Why was he carrying? What was he doing at the mall? The problem was simple. The body cam had already recorded Daniel saying it sooner, more than once. Keller was trying to fix the report before the report existed. Pike looked uncomfortable by then. He wasn't openly correcting Keller, but he had stopped backing his tone. He had heard the same body cam audio everyone else would hear later. He knew Daniel had identified himself early. Daniel stayed steady. That helped him later. He didn't argue for effect. He didn't try to embarrass Keller in front of the crowd. He just repeated the core facts. He had identified himself. He had complied. There was no basis for the detention. Keller finally removed the cuffs. No real apology, just the usual fallback language. Safety concern. Temporary detention. Misunderstanding. None of it fit the footage. Daniel asked for names and badge numbers. He asked whether Keller's body cam was running. He asked whether mall surveillance had captured the stop. Elena confirmed the cameras covered the area and the footage would be preserved. That was a bad moment for Keller, whether he realized it or not. Because now the case didn't depend on memory. It depended on video. Daniel documented everything before leaving. He photographed the marks on his wrists. He noted the time. He got Elena Ruiz's information. He spoke to two shoppers who had recorded the encounter from the start. One of them had clean audio. Another had clear video of Daniel's hands visible during first contact. That mattered too. Keller was already heading toward a common defense. Vague safety language. Claims about uncertain movements. Claims that Daniel had been slow to identify himself. The bystander footage undercut all of it. By that evening, clips had started moving online. People focused on the same parts. A deputy drawing down in a mall. A calm man saying he was federal law enforcement. Credentials appearing, cuffs staying on anyway. It looked exactly like what it was. A deputy who had made a bad read, then made it worse because he didn't want to back down in public. Daniel didn't go online with it himself. He did something smarter. He called Naomi Price. Naomi handled civil rights cases. She cared about sequence, footage, reports, and witnesses. Daniel gave her all of it. Once she reviewed the first clips, she saw the issue immediately. This wasn't a hard case about confusion in a fast-moving threat scene. It was a case about escalation without probable cause, public detention after clear identification, and an officer who kept going after he should have stopped. Then Keller made the worst move yet. His written report didn't match the cameras. Keller's report tried to clean it up. He wrote that Daniel had matched a suspicious person call, failed to follow commands, and delayed identification during an armed encounter in a crowded mall. He leaned on officer safety language. He described uncertain movements. He made the detention sound necessary. The cameras didn't support any of it. Naomi Price got the body cam footage, the mall video, the dispatch log, and the shopper recordings. Put together, the timeline was bad for Keller and worse for the department. Daniel identified himself early, more than once. He tried to explain where his credentials were. His hands were visible during first contact. The original mall call was weak. No report of a threat. No report of a brandished weapon. No crime in progress. Just concern about a man who might be armed in a state where lawful carry wasn't unusual and where law enforcement still had to follow basic rules. That killed the defense before it got moving. The bigger problem was what happened after Keller saw the credentials. He still kept Daniel in cuffs. He still kept questioning him. He still acted like he could repair a bad stop by staying aggressive longer. That's where the case turned from a bad judgment call into a constitutional problem. Naomi framed it exactly that way. Unlawful seizure, excessive force, public detention without probable cause, failure to de-escalate after clear identification. She also focused on the setting: a crowded shopping mall, families present, multiple witnesses, public humiliation. That mattered. Juries understand embarrassment. They understand what it means to be handcuffed in public, while someone with a badge refuses to admit he got it wrong. Internal Affairs opened a review almost immediately. They didn't have much room. The videos were too clear, and Keller's report created another issue. It didn't match the footage in key places. That gets dangerous fast for an officer. Bad force decisions are one thing. A report that looks shaped after the fact is another. Once investigators saw the gap between Keller's words and the recordings, the question stopped being whether he made a mistake. The question became whether he tried to justify it on paper after the fact. Pike got interviewed too. So did Elena Ruiz. So did the shoppers who recorded the stop. Their accounts lined up more than Keller's did. Daniel had stayed calm. He had identified himself. He had not threatened anyone. He had not refused a safe verification process. Keller had driven the scene. The department pulled Keller off mall detail first. Then came administrative leave. That part was quiet for about a week. Publicly, the sheriff's office used cautious language. Review pending. Full fact gathering. Standard procedure. Same script departments always use when the footage is bad and they need time. Online, people had already decided what they were looking at. Former officers said Keller skipped steps. Lawyers said the detention had no clean legal basis once the credentials came out. Regular people said the obvious thing: if Daniel hadn't known how to handle himself, this could have gone much worse. That was the point Daniel kept coming back to. Not publicly at first, privately, in meetings, with Naomi, with federal counsel, with investigators. He had training, credentials, and enough discipline to stay controlled while being publicly humiliated. Most people in that position would not have that exact combination. Some would panic, some would argue, some would move at the wrong second. That's how bad stops turn into funerals and press conferences. About 6 weeks later, Naomi filed the federal civil lawsuit. The complaint named Keller and the county. It laid out the full sequence: weak initial suspicion, immediate escalation, gunpoint detention, ignored identification, continued cuffing after credentials appeared, report language that clashed with video. It also hit the county on training and supervision. That part mattered because cases like this usually aren't about one officer alone. They're about what the system tolerates until a camera makes it impossible to deny. The county fought the filing in public and in court. Standard move. They argued safety, uncertainty, fast decisions, public risk. Naomi pushed back with timestamps and video. She didn't need dramatic language. She had sequence. Sequence wins. At one hearing, the court focused hard on the part Keller couldn't explain away: why Daniel remained handcuffed after credentials were found and dispatch verification was underway. That issue stayed in the case. So did the unreasonable seizure claims. The county didn't get the clean exit it wanted. That changed the pressure. Discovery made things worse for the defense. Training records showed Keller had prior counseling on escalation and report quality, and not some giant secret history. Not enough for a movie twist. Just enough to make the supervision questions sharper. Enough to make the county look like it had warning signs and no real correction plan. That's how liability grows. The sheriff's office eventually announced policy changes tied to armed encounter verification in public commercial spaces. Better identification protocols. Required supervisor notification for extended public detentions. stronger guidance on lawful carry contacts, extra report review steps when body cam footage showed a force escalation. They announced it like a reform. It was really damage control. Keller resigned before the internal process fully finished. That also happens a lot. Departments prefer quiet exits when a case is toxic. It reduces headlines. It doesn't erase the footage. Daniel kept working. He didn't turn into a public celebrity. He didn't go on some media tour every week. He gave one measured statement through counsel and let the filings do the work. Smart move. The calmer he stayed, the worse Keller looked. The case didn't matter because the wrong man got detained. It mattered because the deputy had the right information and kept going anyway. That's the line people need to pay attention to. Mistakes happen. Ego-driven escalation after the mistake is exposed is something else. That's why this story stuck. A deputy in a shopping mall thought command voice and a drawn weapon could cover for weak judgment. They couldn't. Not with body cam rolling. Not with shoppers filming. Not with mall video preserving the sequence. Not with a detainee who knew exactly what had happened and had the discipline to document it instead of inflame it. That's the lesson. Rights don't protect themselves. Cameras help, but cameras alone don't fix anything. Training matters. Supervision matters. And when an officer refuses to back down after the facts are clear, the damage spreads way past one bad afternoon. What would you have done in Daniel's position? And do you think the county should have fought that lawsuit after seeing the footage? Put it in the comments. Share the story with someone who still thinks these cases are always just misunderstandings. And subscribe if you want more stories about power, accountability, and the moments where bad authority finally runs into a record it can't control.
No, I'm not doing this with you. Turn around.
You haven't verified what I handed you.
I looked at it.
You glanced at it.
You think I'm stupid?
I think you're skipping steps.
You don't get to tell me how I work a stop.
Then call the supervisor and prove you know how.
You keep talking like that and this gets worse.
Deputy Aaron Pike thought he had a liar in front of him. A man in plain clothes, calm voice, special ID. Too calm, in Pike's opinion. He read that as attitude, then made the worst decision of his career. He ignored the verification steps, brushed past the warning signs, and cuffed the one person in the county who existed to catch deputies doing exactly that. The man he arrested was undercover internal affairs investigator Nolan Mercer. From that point on, Pike wasn't controlling the stop. He was recording his own downfall. Before this gets uglier, drop where you're watching from. And if you follow stories about body cam footage, bad police stops, and officers wrecking themselves by ignoring policy, hit like and subscribe. This one is a perfect example of how fast ego can ruin a badge. This started on a Thursday night in May 2026, a little after 8 p.m. on the east side of the county. Pike was working traffic enforcement along a corridor deputies liked because it gave them room. A soft violation could turn into a stop could turn into a search request, and a search request could turn into an arrest if the deputy knew how to push. Pike believed he knew how to push better than most. He had 6 years on the job and the kind of reputation departments pretend not to notice until it becomes expensive. He was productive, always active, good numbers, plenty of stops. Younger deputies saw him as sharp. Supervisors tolerated him because he looked confident and rarely hesitated. That confidence covered a real problem. Pike didn't just like control, he needed it. Any resistance, even calm resistance, got under his skin fast. That night he spotted a gray sedan coming off the feeder road and clearing an intersection late, just enough to justify pulling it over if he wanted to be aggressive. So he lit it up. The driver responded the way any deputy claims to want. Smooth pullover, no delay, no sudden movement, engine off, hands visible. Pike still walked up with his body tight and one hand near his belt, already speaking with that clipped tone officers use when they want the stop to feel one-sided from the first second. Behind the wheels sat Nolan Mercer, early 40s, plain clothes, neutral expression. He looked forgettable on purpose because that was part of the job. Mercer had been working an undercover internal affairs operation tied to roadside misconduct, unauthorized vehicle searches, and deputies who treated procedure like a suggestion when they thought nobody important was watching. Pike asked for license and registration. Mercer handed them over without giving him anything to work with. Then he produced a second credential, county-issued, restricted, not something a deputy was supposed to wave off, and definitely not something to mishandle during an active stop. Pike barely studied it. He gave it a fast look, then shifted back to interrogation mode. Where was Mercer headed? Why did he have that credential? Why didn't he mention it immediately? Why was he acting like he knew more than a patrol deputy? Mercer didn't argue. He kept it narrow. He told Pike there was a verification process for that credential and that the stop needed supervisor review before it moved any further. He also used one of the department's built-in fail-safe phrases, the kind designed to quietly alert another officer that this encounter might involve a protected operation. That should have slowed everything down. Instead, Pike took it personally. This is where the stop turned. Not because Mercer escalated. He didn't. Pike did. Mercer stayed measured, and that bothered him more than open defiance would have. A deputy like Pike knew how to respond to fear, excuses, and panic. Calm certainty was different. It made him feel challenged. He pushed harder, asked the same things in slightly different ways, cut Mercer off when he tried to explain, treated procedure like stalling. Mercer told him again that a supervisor needed to be called. He told him again that the credential had to be verified through the proper channel. He warned him clearly that forcing the stop past that point would create a problem Pike would not be able to clean up later. Pike decided Mercer was bluffing. He ordered him out of the car. Mercer complied right away. No delay, no attitude. He stepped out slowly and kept his hands open. Then he tried once more to stop Pike from making a career-ending mistake. He told him to call it in properly. He told him not to freelance the stop. He gave him every chance to back up without looking weak. Pike didn't take any of them. He keyed his radio and told dispatch he had a non-compliant subject making suspicious law enforcement claims. That wording mattered. It framed Mercer as a fake before backup even arrived. Then Pike took the credential again, glanced at it like he'd already made up his mind, and dismissed it. Mercer gave one final warning. Same calm tone, same controlled delivery. He made it plain that if Pike put cuffs on him without making the required notification, the stop would move into misconduct territory immediately. Pike went ahead anyway. He announced a felony arrest for impersonation and obstruction, turned Mercer around, and locked the cuffs on like he'd just cracked something big. In reality, he had just arrested internal affairs investigator Nolan Mercer during an undercover assignment while wearing a body camera after being told more than once to stop and verify. And backup was still coming. Backup reached the shoulder in under 4 minutes. That's how fast bad decisions start to harden into official action. Once other units hear a deputy frame someone as non-compliant and possibly impersonating law enforcement, they don't arrive neutral. They arrive tilted toward force. Pike knew that. He used it anyway. By the time the second unit stopped behind him, Nolan Mercer was already cuffed beside the sedan, standing still, saying very little, and watching Pike dig himself deeper. Pike was moving like a man who thought speed would make him look certain. He told the arriving deputies he had a subject claiming protected status, refusing to cooperate, and possibly carrying fake credentials. He left out the part where Mercer had handed him valid county identification twice. He left out the part where Mercer had asked for a supervisor before Pike ever touched the cuffs. That omission mattered. It poisoned the whole scene. One of the backup deputies, Travis Keene, asked the obvious question. Had Pike run the credential through the restricted channel yet? Pike brushed it off and said he had enough already. That answer should have stopped things right there. It didn't. because Pike was still the primary on the stop, and he was talking like a man who didn't expect to be challenged in front of other deputies. Mercer then did what trained investigators do when the person in uniform has clearly stopped thinking. He stayed exact. He told them Pike had skipped mandatory verification, ignored a restricted identifier, and failed to call a supervisor after being instructed to do so. He also used the fail-safe language again, this time slow enough that any deputy who'd paid attention in training should have caught it. Keene caught part of it, not enough to act, but enough to look at Pike differently. Pike saw that look and got even more defensive. He started talking over Mercer, telling the others that suspects always sound polished when they're trying to create doubt. That line said a lot. He was no longer responding to facts. He was protecting his ego in front of an audience. Then he made it worse. He searched Mercer without waiting for confirmation, pocket by pocket, slow enough for the body camera to capture every bad choice. He pulled out a wallet, a department access card, a folded county memo sheet, and a second credential packet clipped behind the license. Real material, official formatting, the kind of items that should have forced him to pause. Instead, Pike acted irritated that reality wasn't helping him. He told the others that good fakes were getting harder to spot. He said it with the confidence of someone who had already committed too far to turn around. Mercer, still calm, told him again that a supervisor needed to respond before Pike crossed another line. He warned him that the arrest itself was already a serious problem. Pike answered by announcing they were transporting. That was the point where this stopped, looking like a roadside mistake, and started looking deliberate. Transport changes everything. Now there's paperwork, charging language, booking record, chain of command, timestamps. It turns a bad stop into a documented abuse of authority if the facts don't support it. Pike either forgot that or thought he could write around it later. He put Mercer in the back seat. While Pike was doing that, Keene stepped off to the side and made a quiet radio call of his own. Not enough to openly undercut Pike, just enough to check whether a supervisor had actually been notified through the proper channel. The answer came back fast. No supervisor request, no restricted verification call, no internal code entry, nothing. That was devastating, and Keene knew it. Pike was still talking, still selling the arrest, still acting like he had caught someone important. Mercer sat in the rear cage and let him keep going, because by then the damage was speaking for itself. The body cam had the missed credential, the fail-safe phrases, the refusal to verify, the arrest language, the unauthorized search, the skipped notification, all of it. Then the supervisor unit arrived. Sergeant Dana Ruiz stepped out already expecting a problem because Keene's side-channel check had reached the watch commander before her vehicle even hit the shoulder. She walked in fast, took one look at Mercer in cuffs in the back of Pike's unit, and asked Pike the question he should have been ready for if he had done anything the right way. What verification had he completed before making the arrest? Pike gave her confidence instead of an answer. That was his mistake. Ruiz asked to see the credential. Pike handed it over like he still thought he could talk his way through this. She looked at it once, then looked towards the patrol car. Mercer gave her one short identifying phrase tied to the restricted operation. Ruiz recognized it immediately, and just like that, the whole scene changed. The roadside part ended there. The real damage started after that. Sergeant Dana Ruiz took over the scene, separated Nolan Mercer from Aaron Pike, and locked down the evidence chain before Pike could touch anything else. Body camera footage was flagged. Radio traffic was preserved. Dispatch logs were pulled. Ruiz also ordered a second supervisor to handle the vehicle, the stop paperwork, and the scene closeout. Pike wasn't allowed to write the primary report. That alone told everybody in the chain of command how serious this had become. Then came the call Pike couldn't talk his way around. Command staff learned that he had ignored restricted identification, skipped mandatory supervisor notification, falsely framed the stop over the radio, searched Mercer after multiple warnings, and announced a felony arrest without completing the basic verification steps designed for exactly that situation. Worse than that, Mercer's assignment involved misconduct patterns during roadside stops. Pike didn't just blunder into the wrong arrest. He acted out the exact behavior internal affairs had been tracking. That detail killed any hope of a soft landing. By the next morning, Pike was on administrative leave. His weapon had already been taken. His badge was secured. Internal affairs had the footage, the audio, the radio timeline, and Mercer's written statement before Pike ever sat down with a union rep. And once investigators lined up the sequence minute by minute, the case against him became simple. He had chances. That was the problem. A rushed decision can sometimes be defended. A misunderstanding can sometimes be cleaned up. Pike didn't have either. He was warned more than once. He was handed the credential more than once. He was told to call a supervisor more than once. He kept going every time because he thought being challenged was the same thing as being threatened. That's not stress. That's ego with a badge. The internal affairs findings came back fast because the Bodycam did most of the work. The report didn't describe the stop as an ordinary judgment error. It described a pattern inside one encounter: predatory use of authority, failure to follow restricted identification protocol, false and misleading framing over official radio traffic, unjustified escalation, unauthorized search activity, improper arrest declaration, interference with a protected internal operation, loss of credibility. That last one mattered almost as much as the arrest itself. Departments can tolerate a lot longer than they should, but they can't keep an officer once supervisors decide his word can't carry weight anymore. Pike had spent years building a reputation on confidence, numbers, and command presence. None of that helped him now. Once the footage showed he had ignored process in favor of control, all those years shrank down to one question: could anyone trust him with discretion again? The answer was no. The disciplinary hearing moved quicker than Pike expected. No drawn-out drama, no grand speeches. That's how these things usually go when the video is bad enough. The hearing board had the footage in front of them. They had the dispatch transcript. They had the stop timeline. They had Mercer's statement and Ruiz's scene report. Pike came in with years of service, decent evaluations, and the usual argument that he had acted in good faith under pressure. That argument didn't survive contact with the record. Board members focused on the same thing internal affairs had focused on. Why did he keep pushing after the first warning? Why did he ignore the restricted credential? Why did he frame Mercer as non-compliant before verification? Why did he bypass the supervisor's step that would have stopped the whole collapse? Why did he announce a felony arrest when he still hadn't done the required checks? Pike had explanations. None of them were good. He kept circling back to instinct, officer safety, and suspicion. The board kept bringing him back to policy. That difference ended his career. Pike wanted the hearing to judge what he felt in the moment. The board judged what he did, and what he did was all on camera. Mercer testified briefly. He didn't overplay it. He reported that he had identified himself through the proper channel available to him at roadside, used protected language, instructed Pike to involve supervision, and warned him that further escalation would violate department protocol. Then he stopped. He didn't need more. A witness becomes very hard to attack when the video already agrees with him. Ruiz was even worse for Pike's defense because she explained the policy in plain language. Restricted credentials trigger verification. Verification triggers supervision. Supervision slows escalation. Pike skipped all three and then created false urgency to justify what he had already decided to do. That wasn't confusion. That was choice. The board deliberated for less than an hour. Termination. Immediate. Decertification referral followed. So did a formal credibility notice for prosecutors. In practical terms, that meant Brady and Giglio consequences. Once an officer is officially tagged as unreliable, every future prosecutor has to think twice before putting him on a witness stand. Defense attorneys will tear him apart with the record. cases get weaker, testimony gets poisoned. Departments know that. So even if Pike had somehow found another agency willing to ignore the firing, the credibility hit would follow him. His law enforcement career was functionally dead. That's the part people miss when they talk about one bad stop ruining a career. The stop doesn't ruin it by itself. The stop reveals whether the officer was ever safe to trust in the first place. Pike lost the badge in minutes. He lost the career because the footage showed the badge had been carrying more ego than discipline for a long time. Mercer went back to work. The internal affairs operation continued under tighter protection. The department also changed its training block after the case. Restricted identification procedures got rewritten. Supervisor notification requirements were tightened. Scenario training was updated to include fail-safe phrases and protected operation contacts. Command didn't want another deputy claiming he didn't understand what he was seeing. Pike had made that excuse impossible to sell. And that's the lesson here. Policy isn't paperwork. Protocol isn't optional. In modern law enforcement, cameras are always close. Oversight moves faster than it used to. And one officer